Recently, I bought the BMW M4 GT3 as the new team car as we moved over to Iracing for our endurance events. Only problem, at least for me, is I don't really mix well with front engine cars, with my preference in car handling being quite pointy to get the car rotated early on in the corner. The more sluggish front end characteristics of the BMW is something I'm quite concerned about. Front engine cars aren't inherently bad, but it would be something I'll have to learn and get used to. The first week of the new season saw the GT3s racing in Tsukuba for the Asia Regional Series. Tsukuba is a small circuit. The best way I can put it is that it's basically a blown up go-kart track. The track also being quite narrow means grid position is pretty important, as trying to pass can be quite difficult, especially as competition gets tighter. Going into race 1, I had a pretty good idea on what to expect in a track like this, which is people fighting for positions early on in the race, then as the order settles, everyone kinda stays in their little group depending on their pace. As expected, a couple of the cars ahead decided that it would be a great idea to send it into the first hairpin on cold tyres. Good job guys, but thanks for the position. Now all the "oh I know what I'm talking about" mentality aside, I had no idea what I was doing in the BMW. With most of the corners being hairpins, I was very quickly noticing how lazy the front end actually was. But the lack of rotation wasn't the end of it. Coming out of the corner, the car would want to snap, especially as the turbo kicks in halfway up the rev range, and you get a sudden jolt of torque. This was the complete opposite of what I'm used to driving the Porsche. Watching the recording back seems like I'm doing mostly fine, but believe me, I was struggling. Now, as much as I was internally fighting the car and trying to figure out how to drive this thing, I was holding pretty decent pace and making overtakes here and there. I honestly had some pretty fun battles with the other cars as well. One of the highlights being able to race as Ferrari side by side through a sequence of corners in what I'd consider the sketchier parts of the track. While the BMW lacked in rotation, was definitely made up for with its top end. The car has great top speed, which means you can often outdrag other drivers even with a slower exit. I didn't think much of it at first, but this would actually end up paying dividends when Daytona comes around. But back to present time, or technically 5 weeks ago as of riding, I was comfortably sitting in P3 with the 2 leaders kind of off in Narnia and P4 a couple seconds behind. It's times like this where I'd like to experiment with the car a little more, braking at different points, seeing how much the ABS or TC I can use, and trying various different lines. Mostly trying to get used to what I'd consider the very lazy front end. But I was also careful not to take anything too far and take myself out of the race. With the clock running down, I ended my first ever race in the BMW M4 GT3 Evo in P3. Not bad if you ask me. The very next race, things started to pick up a little bit, except I qualified near the back because everyone is just so good at quali. It always baffled me how quickly a lot of these drivers are in just raw pace. Except over a race stint, I seem to keep up or do better than what I'll call quali demons. It's something I kind of pride myself in, where my quali pace definitely isn't the best, but I'll happily do clean, consistent laps again and again. The race start itself was pretty okay. No one did some dumb move into the first hairpin, and just as I thought everyone was being responsible drivers, things quickly fell apart in turn 7 as we were quickly introduced to the Tsukuba we're all too familiar with. A massive multi-car crash causing other crashes due to people just sliding through or not holding their brakes. Various cars lost their rears through turn 7, sending them spinning and into the cars rounding the third hairpin. Me being at the back of the grid somehow saved me from getting tangled up in that literal GT3 slip and slide. But this didn't last long, as a spinning Corvette up front caused another multi-car collision, breaking up the train behind me, and also nearly taking me out in the process. I was also getting used to the car as well. By this point, I've learned to at least try for a lopsided V-line where I have a wide U-shaped line with a sharp turn in at the apex before straightening out the car for the exit. While I was still a little uncomfortable, it definitely wasn't as bad as race 1. Now, just as I thought things were going well, I got shunted by a Ferrari. And not just a normal Ferrari, the Max Verstappen Team Red 9 livery Ferrari, who decided that it would be a great idea. But now I was on a mission to chase this guy down and get back my rightful position that I almost felt like it was stolen from me. It took me 6 laps to close the gap, but going into the penultimate lap, I managed to get a good run on the start-finish straight and sending the inside just like he did. Except I made sure he knew exactly where I was by getting up alongside early on in the corner. On the final lap of the race, the Porsche managed to get a good run out of the final hairpin, putting us alongside for the final corner. There was a little bit of door-to-door banging, but he lost traction mid-corner and went spinning. I'm not too sure if that was partially or entirely on me, but either way, not something I'm very proud of coming across the line in P5. Maybe someone let me know if that's me or not. If the last race wasn't enough to convince me that sooner or later I'm gonna be the one tangled up in that big accident on this track, well, this would be the one. I had a pretty terrible start, which had me falling behind a little bit. With a lot of the cars aiming for the inside line, I opted for the outside line, hoping to stay out of trouble. What I didn't realize was that there's little to no camber on the outside, and that mixed with cold tires had me wash out of the track a little bit. But the small detour may have just saved me from the absolute chaos that happened in the mini chicane, because oh my god, the amount of collisions was insane. My little trip through the grass made it so I was far back enough that I could just watch the carnage unfold in front of me and weave my way through the aftermath. The next laps weren't too bad. The field had already spread out, so I could just drive the car without worrying about the others around me. Except going into turn 7, a Mustang lost it and spun. At the time of driving, I just managed to avoid the Mustang, but due to netcode I tagged the rear, which on replay is very obvious. I was honestly so annoyed at the 4X at the time. But if I recall correctly, there wasn't much if any damage to the car at all, so we kept going. At this point, about a quarter of the field has crashed and or retired, moving me into P10. And that's where I'll stay for the next while. Like the last two races, the field once again had spread out, putting me on an island, so I once again used the opportunity to try just different things and learn the quirks of the car. It's moments like these where I tend to have these little epiphany moments on things like certain corners or a specific car characteristic. These moments are also what solidifies my belief that both seat time and active engagement of what you're doing is so important if you're trying to improve. So often we fall into a trap where once we're comfortable at something, that's all we ever do, confined in a box where we feel safe. But it's pushing beyond this comfort zone that leads to improvement. While in a race, the risks I take to try something different isn't very high, mostly sticking to trying different lines or pushing the brake markers a little further if I feel like I'm slowing down too early. But in the practice sessions is where you can really start to push the boundaries of what you're capable of. This has especially been the case leading up to the 24 Hours at Daytona, but the Daytona story hasn't been written yet, so that will be a story for another day. After driving mostly alone for nearly half the race, I came across the finish line in P9. Not great, but still enough to gain a little iRating. The 3 races I did on a random evening at Tsukuba to test out the BMW may have been the most chaotic series of races I have ever done in iRacing, which in hindsight was probably something I should have expected considering how small and narrow the track really is with very little opportunity for passing. But after 2 very chaotic races, I had a feeling sooner or later I would be the one in the meat grinder, and I'd rather not stick around to find out. While this is where this story ends, my journey with the BMW has just begun, and in a few short weeks, I'll have my first big break with the BMW M4 GT3 Evo at Daytona. What are we doing, man? Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Okay, so yeah, I got caught in a collision in lap 3, so we're currently down at P37. But I have good news for you. Recovery drive of a lifetime incoming.